Maxx Crosby just sent a message after Texans versus Raiders, and Raider Nation needs to hear this. The game is over, but Crosby's words could be even more important than what happened on the field. After a physical matchup with Houston, the Raiders' defensive leader was asked about the performance, the defense, and what this team needs to do next. And the way Crosby approached it showed exactly why his voice matters inside this locker room. Remember, this is a player coming back from a major knee injury, stepping into a new season with a new head coach, a new defensive system, and plenty of questions surrounding the Raiders. Yet Crosby has made one thing clear throughout camp. He isn't interested in excuses. He wants to compete, get better, and push this defense to another level. Against Houston, that mentality was on display again. The Texans brought plenty of physicality, and the Raiders had to deal with pressure, tough matchups, and the intensity that comes with preseason football. But Crosby's focus wasn't just on one play or one result. He kept pointing toward the bigger picture. And that's where this gets interesting. Crosby knows preseason results don't tell the whole story. What matters now is how quickly the Raiders can turn these reps into consistency before the regular season arrives. The defense has talent, the pass rush has real potential, and Crosby is expected to be the engine that makes the entire unit more aggressive. But there's another part of his comments that Raider fans shouldn't overlook. Crosby has repeatedly talked about leadership, accountability, and setting the standard for younger players. With rookies and new additions fighting for their roles, his presence could become one of the biggest advantages this team has. And after everything Crosby went through earlier this year, including the unbelievable trade saga that ended with him staying in Las Vegas, his mindset heading into this season is especially important. And that mentality became even clearer once the Raiders got a real test against Houston. Crosby wasn't just focused on his own numbers. He was watching how the defense responded when the Texans pushed back. That matters because the Raiders are building a different identity under Clint Kubiak. They need 11 players flying to the football, communicating, and finishing every snap. Crosby understands that better than almost anyone, and his comments reflected that mindset. He also knows the standard has to start with him. If Crosby plays with maximum effort, the rest of the defensive front has to match it. But there was another detail that made his reaction interesting. Crosby has spent months dealing with uncertainty, questions about his future, and the challenge of getting back. Earlier this year, his situation with Baltimore became one of the wildest stories of the offseason before the trade fell apart, and he returned to Las Vegas. Since then, he has made it clear that he wants to move forward and prove exactly what he can still do. Every rep matters. The Texans matchup gave Crosby another chance to test himself against a talented opponent, and Houston's players have shown respect for him. Will Anderson Jr. called Crosby one of the top players in the league, while DeMeco Ryans praised his relentless effort. That respect is important because Crosby isn't simply trying to have another good season. He has talked openly about wanting to be the greatest at what he does, and that mentality changes the way you look at every game. So when Crosby talks about improvement, effort, and the defense coming together, Raider Nation should pay attention. The numbers will come later. The bigger question is whether this defense can develop the consistency needed to compete. And there's one part of Crosby's message that could become even more important once the regular season begins. How this new Raiders defense responds when things stop going their way. And it matters here. That response is what makes Crosby so important to this Raiders team. When the defense gets tested, the players around him are going to look for his reaction. If the offense struggles, if Houston gets momentum, or if the pass rush is not getting home, Crosby is expected to keep the energy high and make sure nobody checks out. For Las Vegas, that leadership could be just as valuable as his production. The Raiders have plenty of young talent, but young players need veterans who understand what winning football actually requires. Crosby has been through losing seasons, coaching changes, injuries, trade rumors, and constant pressure. He knows that one good game does not fix everything, and one bad game does not define a season. That is why his comments after facing the Texans deserve attention. Instead of looking for someone to blame, the focus stays on execution. The defensive line has to communicate better. The linebackers have to trust their assignments. The secondary has to stay disciplined. And when an opportunity comes to finish a play, the Raiders have to make it count. Crosby can set that tone from the first snap. There is also a bigger question surrounding his role this season. With a new coaching staff and a different approach, how will the Raiders use their best defensive weapon? Will Crosby be moved around the formation more often? Will he spend more snaps attacking from the interior? And can the Raiders create enough pressure on the opposite side to stop offenses from simply sending extra protection toward him? Those answers could completely change the way opponents prepare for Las Vegas. If another pass rusher starts winning one-on-one matchups, Crosby becomes even more dangerous. If the interior collapses the pocket, quarterbacks have fewer places to escape. And if the secondary holds coverage for just another second, Crosby has the chance to turn that extra moment into a sack, a forced fumble, or a game-changing hit. That is the formula of the team. And that formula starts with creating pressure before the quarterback can settle into the pocket. Crosby does not have to win every snap by himself. If the rest of the defensive front can create problems, his opportunities should increase naturally. That is also where Kubiak's system becomes important. The Raiders need a defense that can disguise pressure, attack from different angles, and force quarterbacks to make decisions quickly. Crosby has the experience to recognize those situations, but the younger players around him have to execute their assignments. Against Houston, every defensive snap gave the coaching staff another chance to evaluate the chemistry. They were looking at communication, pursuit, and how quickly players reacted when the play changed. Those details can decide games once the regular season starts. For Crosby, the biggest challenge is staying healthy while still playing with the same aggression that made him one of the league's most respected pass rushers. Coming off a serious knee injury, managing his workload could become a major part of the Raiders' plan. They need him fresh when the games matter most. And that creates another interesting situation. Imagine a fourth quarter with Crosby still attacking at full speed while an opposing offensive line is already exhausted. That is exactly the type of scenario that can change a close game in seconds. The Raiders also need production from the players next to him. If offenses know Crosby is the only threat, they can send double teams his way. But if another defender starts winning, coordinators have a much tougher decision to make. That is why the development of this defensive unit could be one of the biggest stories surrounding Las Vegas. Crosby provides the star power, but the supporting cast will determine how much freedom he actually gets. Now, the biggest question is whether this defense can turn its potential into consistent pressure once the regular season gets underway all season. Maxx Crosby's message after the Texans game says a lot about where the Raiders are heading. He's not focused on excuses or individual stats. He's focused on getting better, setting the standard, and making this defense tougher every single week. With Crosby leading the way, Raider Nation has plenty of reasons to watch closely as the regular season gets closer. Because if this defense can match Crosby's intensity, Las Vegas could become a much tougher team to deal with.